Welcome to today's edition of Online for Authors. I'm Carol O'Neill, and joining me today is Tim O'Hearn, who wrote the book Framed, A Villain's Perspective on Social Media. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks for having me.
From MySpace to Twitter to TikTok, you were there. You were very much a part of it all. So my first question to you is, what made you decide to write this sort of expose?
It is accurate to say that I was there at the start in these very important moments in early internet history. For me, the big concern was that so many of these memories I have and millions of other Americans have are slowly being lost. And really, there was no effort made to preserve some of these experiences, both from the cultural standpoint, the academic end of things, even financially, and the impact it's had on society as a whole. So I thought it would be a neat exercise to kind of capture my thoughts, my opinions, and most importantly, my memories of that crucial period of the early 2000s into essays. And eventually those essays had a common enough thread to want to put them into a book.
Interesting. So when Instagram launched in 2010, what happened to MySpace Tom?
The funny thing about Tom from MySpace is that his primary interest was in photography. And a lot of people will forget that he was like this demigod, if you will, of the early internet where everybody knew his face. They didn't know much about him, but a lot of people thought that he had started MySpace and had coded MySpace and had done all the business functions of MySpace. But my understanding is that he was actually just an early employee involved in business development. So already by 2010, we saw that MySpace had been largely surpassed by Facebook, and then very soon after, of course, by Instagram. Our friend MySpace Tom actually migrated a lot of his content creation to Instagram, which at that time had a reputation for being the best social network for photographers and hobbyists to share really pretty photos.
Right. I will tell you that most authors who, join this podcast think of social media marketing as they create their own websites, maybe even buy an ad on Facebook. They want people to go to their website and follow them. But it surprised me that way back when you had a scheme that claimed to get more people followers. In fact, Instagram growth became part of your identity. Explain what you did to get that role and how that worked.
Sure. To acknowledge, I think it's fair to say social media marketing is a huge part of what everyone does now, regardless of what you're creating or what what your stance is. If you're on social media, my opinion is you're doing some form of marketing, however implicitly. My journey was a really, really interesting one where I was coming from the side of a software engineer. And as a software engineer who had grown up with social media, Web 2.0, what we did on Instagram, starting in about 2017, 2018, was create a bot that would log into a user's account, impersonate that user, and take actions, interacting with other people. So it might be Carol's account, it might be Tim's account, it might be your friend, your cousin, whatever. And we would take actions with the purpose of gaining reciprocal actions in return. So of course, this has a precedent in just normal social life, where if you're walking down the street and you see someone with a nice pair of shoes, you might stop and say, hey, that's a nice pair of shoes. If you say that to them, they might receive it warmly and they might say, oh, well, yeah, I like your jacket. And that same social contract exists on the internet. And I created bots. So I programmed solutions that abused it and that scaled it to millions and millions and millions of interactions because these reciprocal actions were so valuable. So like likes, comments, follows, we were able to charge a fee for the service. So that was really the kernel of what I wrote about in Framed.
You did, I know. I read where you wrote that social media platforms have the same complicated relationships with spam bots that the U.S. Postal Service has with junk mail. Explain to our audience what you mean.
There is a thread on the internet that when we talk about mail and junk mail and the economics of the US Postal Service, it is often revealed that the reason you get those spam flyers and all that junk mail in your physical inbox is because those companies paying for postage essentially subsidize the US Postal Service. And so they kind of have some standards, but there's a reason why they haven't implemented all of their own blocks, is because the reason a stamp doesn't cost, I don't know, twice what it does today, is because the Postal Service is subsidized by spam and bulk mail. In the same way, when we look to the internet and we look at traffic and we look at, messages and interactions as a new type of currency, these bot creators or people who are excessively using the platforms in ways that may be disruptive are ultimately useful to the platforms. Because at the end of the day, the platform doesn't have this extremely fine-grained report that they send to their investors. All they say is, here's how many active users we have, here's how much ad revenue we made, and just a couple different high-level metrics. So buried under that could be fake accounts, bot accounts, and disruptive actions. Because at the end of the day, for the platform itself, all of those count as things we would recognize as universally good from the investor perspective.
Huh, interesting. Can you talk a little bit about shout out marketing and how it influences users to sell ad space?
We had this weird, I would say, disparity where before we had the concept of influencer and before influencers were really able to monetize their followings and their popularity, there emerged this practice, which I've called shout out marketing, where essentially you would pay someone who is more popular than you to not run an ad necessarily, but to say, hey, Tim's a cool guy, and maybe tag Tim in a comment, in a post, or in a picture. And this is not dissimilar to what we see in the real world, where when you have different PR agencies, the whole point is put your client close to people who are more famous or popular than them. So rather than spending $20,000 to go to an award ceremony or a gala, in the real world, in shout out marketing, we were talking about paying $5, $10, $20 for someone who is kind of important on the internet to say, hey, follow this guy. And it quickly became a very, very spammy practice. There have been different offshoots of it, but people buy things because they typically work. And for the types of traffic that people were looking for, shout out marketing in its early stage did have some impact. Further, I will say that more advanced, sophisticated campaigns today could be classified as shout out marketing. You just don't know. But when you look at, a tier 1 or tier 2 celebrity, there is an entire shadow network of people trying to place other people alongside those influencers in the same pictures. Ultimately, that's just a shout out, but we don't use that phrase anymore.
That's interesting. What were the many roles that you had at Shark Social?
Shark Social was the company that I codenamed for most of my involvement in the Instagram growth space. I was first brought in as what I describe as a code monkey. So I did not found the business. I had very little background of making money from this type of private exploitation of social media platforms. But I was brought in to actually help with payments, website design, and early integrations of like, hey, we should send an email when this happened. And to any listener today, I can say, this is almost 10 years ago. There was not a drag and drop website builder for every one of these features. Like you still needed to have someone who knew how to program. After I did that, we started to look at what this opportunity might have been. I started to send unsolicited recommendations to the founders, and they quickly brought me on as what you would say is like the technical lead. So rather than just getting requirements, delivering them, and shaking hands and getting a check for $500, instead I was given a piece of the revenue share, and it was up to me to kind of dictate what markets we went into as far as where we were trying to do advertising, what our platform actually did, and ultimately deciding the feature set that we were offering to customers. So I had a lot of involvement in both business development as well as the technology side of things, as well as written marketing.
Now, you're no longer with that company, correct?
That's right. Yeah, Shark Social folded many years ago, mainly due to restrictions by Meta, which owns Instagram.
By Meta, right? I understand that. Well, first of all, can you tell me a little bit about attending your first hackathon?
Hackathons are a funny thing where the term existed prior to this iteration we've seen on college campuses, but this is where the term really bloomed, or I would say blossomed, into what it is today. When I was in college in the 2010s, there was this growing notion that a way for non-traditional candidates to get jobs at Google, at Microsoft, at Palantir, at the most exciting companies, rather than just applying and sending your resume in, you would compete in a hackathon, which is really a programming competition where you would hack together some like kind of free form project over a condensed period of time, usually a weekend. And I was fortunate enough to go to Penn Apps at the University of Pennsylvania for my first hackathon. And that helped drive a lot of my interest in the space and what it means to be, what it meant to be a software engineer during that time period. And it helped form a lot of my opinions as far as what duties I believe large tech companies have for access to their platforms and to help spur and encourage innovation.
Do they still do hackathons today?
They do. One could argue that hackathons are more popular than ever, aside from the COVID bump in which, placing a bunch of like sweaty computer science students in a closed space was not the best idea. But they still are very vibrant. A lot of colleges have them. Workplaces have them. I've even seen social clubs that host hackathons as well. But the point or the thesis of my essay titled Hackathon Hackers is really that the things me and my buddies worked on 10 years ago are very, very different from what you could work on at a hackathon today, simply because API access, meaning like the programming interface for Facebook, for Twitter, for social media sites, has been completely restricted to the average college student.
Well, so now you can use them. So let me ask another question. I understand that Instagram says that shadow bans don't exist. What do you say?
They do exist, and the many ways of manipulating what we see, what we do, or how what we do is perceived is vast. Like there is just so much going on there that happens at a programming level where, of course, shadow banning exists, but also you have this like algorithmic interference, which is also a form of shadow banning, where if you post using a certain term, it might look to you as if your post has just been, submitted and has been posted just like anything else. But in actuality, the audience it's shown to is very limited. So because we've moved to this smart newsfeed type implementation on every social media platform, it gives these platforms an unbelievable level of control in controlling what information is actually shown. And in most cases, it's not this grand conspiracy. And there are some things to be said about ensuring people aren't spamming or like aren't saying really awful things. Like you need some filtering. I think a lot of the concerns over the last 5 years have been related to political discourse, where we've seen a lot of allegations of shadow banning based around political discussions, which do not necessarily have a violent, undertone.
Right, and more popular today than ever, I would say.
Absolutely. At this point, things have become so fractured where you used to be able to maybe go to one site and have a somewhat balanced two-sided debate. Now, depending on your affiliation or your viewpoints, you have a specific website where you go just to speak to people who probably already share your view. So it's been an unfortunate, I think the split between Twitter or X and then blue sky is truly unfortunate for healthy discourse, especially in America.
Yeah, I think you're right. Can you explain the dead internet theory?
This was a conspiracy that started many years ago on a forum that nobody remembers. And it was this idea that the internet has become so much less personal than what a lot of us grew up with. And it seemed like when
Right.
we were just discovering these things for the first time, you actually made online friends. Like you played a game or you requested someone on MySpace from the other side of town. And like you seem to have these very real connections. Somewhere along the way, things became so commoditized and just so busy, and we became so overwhelmed with information, really, that the genuineness of the authenticity of these interactions began to be called into question. And it's not saying like, are the people real, but it's saying, are there enough financial incentives for governments or for large companies to be faking some of the personas or some of what we see on the internet, to the extent that if you or I was to log in, what percentage of content of interaction is real? And the truth
Yeah.
is that at first, before AI, so in like the pre like transform like GPT world, this was kind of just like a fringe. It was like a funny thought experiment, very interesting, but it was just an experiment. With ChatGPT now, when you can actually
Yeah.
have very very plausible fake text, decently plausible fake images, kind of plausible deep fakes and videos, you can now look at entire like content campaigns and say there was maybe one human involved, but nothing is real. The person I'm talking to isn't real, and it's been a big concern about like what it means for the internet, and also what it means for, you would say, like state level propaganda and information control systems.
Yeah. And so many now are using Chat CBT. It's just, and with AI, it's just the thing that they're doing now. Um, for those of you who are getting into this conversation and want to hear more about it, you might want to go over to Facebook and log on to Novels and Latte on their Facebook page, because they might have a actual book that you could win and have as your own. I When I wrote this review, I said that for me, I couldn't read this in one sitting. It was like a course for me. I felt like I was taking a course and you were my professor, and I was taking it day by day. So other people might feel that way as well if they're not as up to um, the state of the art as you are. I know that Elon Musk was complaining about fake followers when he purchased Twitter in 22, and you admit to buying fake Twitter followers when you did in 2012. So you knew a lot about the fake accounts and how they were created, and the use of software programs to control them. Have they changed much since then?
I no longer am actively involved there, but I would say that there has definitely been better control across the entire internet of fake accounts. And we see a lot of this in simply the push for all accounts to be verified. Uh, there are reasons that 10 years ago this was not feasible, to say, oh, you have to submit your ID and somebody's going to confirm that it's actually a real ID and it's actually you. This is a
Right.
newer idea in this like new wave of the internet. But before that was a thing, a lot of these social media companies were not profitable at all, and they wanted more
Oh,
users. They wanted more users at any cost. So if they just saw the user count continuing to go up, as long as nobody was complaining too loudly about fake accounts or what those fake accounts might have been doing, they
right.
let it slide. And Twitter probably had the worst reputation for this. And Elon was correct in his allegations, in that it was well known, even back to news articles, that some of the news articles I cited have not been put in print. Like they have never been cited in print before until my book Framed. Those same arguments and those same issues were true when Elon complained that, hey, there's a lot of fake stuff on Twitter and I'm not giving this valuation because so much of it is phony.
Right. Right. That's so interesting. Can we talk a moment about spam messaging?
Absolutely.
Tell me what you think about it.
Spam is a complicated topic. It's been
It is.
around on the internet, and since I started using it, you used to have television ads where you were getting ads for spam blockers and pop-up blockers and all these things that we still get all over our digital experiences that people had created products to block literally 20 years ago. So how have we not extricated ourselves from this problem? Even as the internet has become so much more advanced. I think a lot of it could be sourced to a really, really good book called Spam Kings, which was written about the first era of spam in which email spam specifically had proliferated. And what I really liked about Brian and his book is that he wrote a blog for a few years after Spam Kings. And you'll remember in that era of the internet, they were selling like like male enhancement supplements and just like very skeevy types of products in the spam. And these days you still do get spam, but it tends to be a lot more targeted, where like there's a better chance of you converting to a paying customer, like it's for real products. What Brian did that I really appreciated in his blog was right before he signed off and said, "I'm not writing this blog anymore," he covered the emergence of the same spamming techniques being taken to social media with My Friend Bot on MySpace. And he made this grand connection without which I don't know if my book would have as much of a leg to stand on. He made a connection between the email spam of the early aughts and this new wave on MySpace, which most people who used MySpace have no idea, no remembrance of it having happened. Essentially what happened then years later was when MySpace, gave way to Facebook, gave way to Instagram and Snapchat or whatever. These same practices, the exact same ways to structure a program, to get your product out there, get your ideas out there, get your persona out there, were harnessed by the next wave of software engineers. And that comprised the basis of what I did at Shark Social more than 10 years later.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. Wow. So do you think AI and chat GBT, and we know that it's changing some digital content, where do you see it going?
It's very sad. I'm a fan of this podcast, and when really we think about it, and the most consequential thing for me is thinking about what it means for content creators, especially long form authors. And we're seeing this manifest itself in a lot of terrible ways. The first, which I do address in my book, which is local journalism and also long form content creation. Even since I wrote the book and I talk about my hometown newspaper essentially becoming nothing, like getting bought by a hedge fund and, 75, well, the update is like basically they fired 75% of the staff and there's no real journalism anymore. The point is that that's from a town of like 80,000 people. If you think that's bad, you have to look elsewhere across America and see that the pillars of the community, in which cases might have been that single hometown newspaper, do not exist, or single hometown broadcasting station, which is now probably owned by Sinclair Broadcasting. It simply does not exist. It is not independent. It does not serve the purpose that the press should. So the press has been decimated by that. I'll hold my tongue on recent events. But then when we consider content creation in shorter form, so things on Reddit, things on LinkedIn, people writing emails, it's become very, very scary. If I had to tell you that even in my day, so I work full time now as a software engineer. If I had to tell you how many emails I get that are clearly written by AI, if I had to tell you that I've sat for several podcasts where the host's entire script had been written by AI, you wouldn't believe me. But the crazier part is that some of the people using AI do not have the self-awareness to understand that other people know that they're using AI. And the farther and farther these two sides get, that's, I think, the really, really scary part, where we can talk about differences in what it means to be original, what it means to, say the truth, and what it means to actually be a creative. I will say I'm glad I wrote my book when I did, because I don't have to deal with those allegations as much. But in 5 or 10 years, I really don't know. And when we look at the next generation, being raised in a world where if nobody's monitoring their access to AI, they won't be learning in the proper way using like more orthodox methods. How many people will even be able to understand what my book is saying or what some of your other guests' books are saying?
I agree. I am concerned myself, because I'm glad I'm not a professor today. I'm glad I'm retired, because, before I retired, we used to have a program that we could use to see whether students were plagiarizing.
Sure.
And it's gone way beyond plagiarizing. It's like you said, they don't even realize that, 75 other people have the exact same story, and they're not even looking to see if they have it. So I just don't know how, faculty are going to deal with the students today who are always using ChatGPT. It's just something that, like I said, I'm glad I don't have to deal with it. So what's next for you? Are you writing another book? Are you safely sitting there just being a software engineer? Or what are you doing?
I appreciate the question, Carol. And, for any author, you've had some really great ones on this podcast. It goes in phases, right? Where you're super excited, then you're kind of depressed, then you're excited again, then you get a new idea, then you get writer's block. And this is part of being a creative, especially in a time where it's never been easier to publish, but it's probably never been harder to stand out from the pack. My book, it was something that I decided it was probably a one of one. I was going to put it out there and move on with my life. And, since writing it, and of course, since even, sending you a copy, I have gone back to being a software engineer. So I work at a startup now called Kalshi. Kalshi is known for being the innovator in prediction markets here in the United States, which is a cause very, very important to me when we talk about the concept of truth, and also the fact that I worked in quantitative trading for all of my 20s. So for me, a huge portion of the decision making here over the summer, especially when I was really, really tight in the book, PR mode, was deciding, like, do I want to try to go on a speaker circuit? Do I want to try to write a slightly more accessible books in the technology space, or do I want to go back to industry? And the decision to me was pretty clear. I'm not a natural promoter. I am not built to do marketing, and it's really tough to deal with the ebbs and flows of being an indie author. So I did choose to go back to to industry. And I guess one of the funny things is people at the office now ask me, will you one day write the book about Kalshi? And my stance is I sure as hell hope not. But I'm really, really happy to have had the experience of going through it, doing it all my way, and selling, hundreds and hundreds of copies of the book.
It surprises me to hear you say that you're not, that it's not your thing to promote yourself. And for someone who spent so much time actually promoting things on the internet, it blows my mind to hear you say, that's really not my thing. I'm going to go back to being, to doing what I think I do best at. So there isn't a book in the works right now. There isn't a book I'm publishing in the works right now.
I don't think so. And if there was, it would be much more of like it would be closer to many of your other guests, which is more on the fiction side of things. But no, currently I'm working pretty long hours, and I'm just very happy to get back to focusing on, I think what I'm best at. And I am probably the first one to recognize the irony of what I'm saying, in that I made a ton of money promoting things. And now my own promotion was almost inept in comparison to what it takes to have a bestseller today. The great irony is that because I've had so many restrictions, and because I am ultimately somewhat of an introverted person, I don't really have the social media following that I should. Like, I have a pretty good mailing list and a personal website, but what I realized is nobody cares about my 1,000-word blog posts on my website. You need to be on TikTok. You need to be on Instagram creating short form
Right.
video content if you want to really excel. And kind of my decision at the very outset of Framed and that final phase there was that I would not do that. And of course, I could have sold probably 30 times as many books if I made the effort and hired a PR firm to help me do that.
Yeah.
But I really have no regrets about not doing it.
Well, that's good to hear. There are a lot of us authors who feel the same way.
Yeah.
Well,
No, it's like we're good at writing. We're not, the promotion thing. It's like a full-time job
right,
in and of
right,
itself.
exactly. You spend so much time thinking about your fiction or whatever it is you're writing that you certainly don't have that kind of time to think about marketing it.
Right.
So it's like two different worlds. But anyway, I wish you luck in your new job. And do you have a website that people, if they have questions about Framed, could
Yeah.
contact you?
Sure. I appreciate you saying that, Carol. And it's been great to talk to you as well. My personal website is tjohern.com. There you can find hundreds of blog posts going back to 2016. And I also have a more modern newsletter at timohern.beehive.com, which is more short form, often linking to the blog, but updated much more frequently.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.